Hey, you guys, it's me, Dr. Torie. My book is officially out. And yes, it is time to talk about ACEs. You guys can find the books everywhere. However, I would encourage you guys to go to my website, Be VicTORIEus.com, and place your order today. Yes, it's time to talk about ACEs. Let's go, y'all. Hey, you guys, it's Dr. Torie. This episode does contain a trigger warning, so we just wanted you guys to be aware. Thank you. Hello, hello, you guys. Welcome to another episode of Be Victorious. You know who I am. I'm Dr. Victorious, the person that creates victory while affecting change in others. And it is my pleasure. When I mean my pleasure, oh my God. There are ACEs educators, you guys, out there, and this one was delivered to me on a silver platter. I have always said that ACEs is an international issue. It's a worldwide, global discussion that we have to have. And when I tell you I met this author, she is good. She's all on Amazon. Yep, y'all know me. I'm a researcher. I checked her out. She has books. She has discussions. She has trainings. And she is sitting right there in the United Kingdom with my boy Nick. Dr. Lydia, tell us more because I am so excited to meet another ACEs educator.
Good
Yeah.
evening, good morning. Where it from the
Good.
UK says good morning for us, good evening for you.
And
Nice, thank you for having me.
thank you. Now tell us what time it is over there.
It's 5 minutes past 12 midnight.
So it's actually Friday.
It's Friday, early hours of Friday morning.
And we still got a couple of more hours left here in the United States. It is indeed my pleasure to have you. What I like is your introduction. You introduce yourself like, hello, you handled your business. You basically put yourself out there and said, hey, I'm glad to know that you have a community. I want to be a part of it. I want you to know who I am just as much as I want to know who you are. And that to me was empowering within itself because again, once upon a time I thought I was by myself. And here it is, episodes later, a community later, a book later. I mean, you have books. You've been doing this for a very, very long time. So to have you on this podcast, this is my pleasure. Tell us more about you.
Okay, so I grew up here in the UK. I was put into foster care, not the government one, but I mean, most families put their children in care so that they can actually work. So I was in care for 4 years, and my parents came and took me back without notice. And so I was more or less torn away from those that I loved. I didn't even know that they were white. I actually thought that they were, I didn't know what color they was. A 4 year old, didn't really know, but I was being looked after, I was being cared.
Right.
Now, living with my parents, who I didn't know were my biological parents, was really tough going because the very first few days were really tough. They told me, well, you're not going back to your foster parents, you're staying here with us in London.
Hmm.
Um, I remember having a dream that night where I saw my foster mum arms stretched out and I was running to her and the dream started to fade. I still remember that dream even to today. And that was it. I never saw her for many, many years later, and that was before I was being taken to Nigeria. But staying with my mother especially, she was very, very abusive. She if I woke up late, I'm going to be beaten with wire, and if I'm going to be beaten with wire, basically I'm taking off all my clothes to be beaten with wire. And that went on for many years. The social services got involved, but unfortunately, she lied to them. And, as at that time in the UK, you have the social services with you and your mother. So
Right.
they asked me the question, and I had to, because I saw my mother's look, I had to tell the story that, nothing happened. And after they left, I was then beaten again that if I ever told anybody. And so I never told anyone. And I didn't really know that next door neighbor, I thought they were being I thought that was the treatment. I thought that was normal treatment in life. I didn't know it was abuse.
Right.
And there was a time I lied. Obviously, I was being taught to lie by my parents, but then when I now lied to cover myself, I was getting punished for it. So on one instance, I lied about taking the new school blouse to school. And my mother use the cable wire to beat me, to get me to tell the truth. When eventually I did, she pushed me to the floor and my two front teeth broke. And I then had to lie again to the dentist. She didn't take me to the dentist, my dad did. And I had to then cover for her that I fell over at school. I still have the caps in till this time, although it's been changed a couple of times. So I was going through all of this, and I didn't really have anyone to talk to. I didn't have anyone to discuss it with. Uncles and aunties would come, and when my mom's punishing me, they would say, oh, they would plead with my mom, and then she'll let me off, But I mean, it wasn't that there was any reporting to any higher authority. That was just how we were living. The one that was really bad for me, because unfortunately the impact of all those things I still live with some of those things. The one that was really bad was that she can't remember what I did. I mean, that's the sad part of it. I can't remember. I know it's either I lied or I did something wrong. But on this occasion, she hit me on the head with a mop stick, and we're talking about the early 70s. So the mop sticks were metallic with wood. They're not soft like these days. And my head I started to hear a sizzling sound, and it was pumping out with blood, and I just held my head. And she said, I must stop that noise. I didn't know how to stop the noise, but I then held my head. Then she put me under the hot water in the bathroom to get the blood to stop. And then she started treating it with mentholated spirit. Unfortunately, I I had to live with that. Every day she was treating it with mentholated spirit. On another occasion, I didn't eat my food in time, and she uses cable wire. That is the wire we use to plug. That's what she uses. She bundles it up and then she hits me with it. In the process, because she hits me with it so much, the metal inside then begins to, you know, ooze out of the wire now, of the soft plastic. And so that then digs into my skin. So that's why when I'm telling people, I'm explaining my story, I have over 60 injuries that are still physical, that can be physically seen, even though I had those injuries from when I was about 5 years old till I was about 12. And so those injuries are still very physical today. Now, what then happened was in the family, I'm the firstborn. I have a junior sister. We're a family of four. And so I have two immediate junior sister and then a brother and a sister. Now, the last two don't even know anything about the abuse at all. And the reason why is that when they're younger, but then
Hmm.
it was my sister and myself that were being abused more by
Mm.
my mom. And one of the things I didn't realize until I started my counseling course was bedwetting is one of the hidden symptoms. We were wetting our beds. I wet my bed into teenagers and we were being beaten for wetting our bed. And my sister, I felt more for her because she was wetting her bed and it's like, we're trying to put on an alarm or get ourselves to wake up. If we don't, we're going to get beaten. Now, and this transcended even into when we were taken to Nigeria. Now, unfortunately, my sister had a fire accident. She was 8. My brother was 3.5. They were left home alone. I was still to go to school. And so there was a fire accident, and my sister had burns, 60% burns, but thank God she survived that. My parents, I mean, it was a case of neglect, but my parents got a good lawyer, so obviously they were able to go free while we were put in a care home until the court case. Now, after the court case, well, during the court case or before it, I was asked to be the social services social worker said, write down everything, that has happened to you. And so I was right because it never happened. This was the first time I can actually tell somebody what has been happening to me. I don't know how my parents got the address of where we were in the care home, and they came and said, I think the lawyer sent them and said, what have they asked you? What did you tell them? What are you doing? I said, well, they asked me to write some things and I said I should bring it. And that was the end of it. And so basically that could have been the evidence, but then there was no evidence because my parents took it. So these were things that I was battling with. I got to a point, I told my mother I hated her because the treatment I was getting. And so she told me she hated me too. So, it was even at that time, I was very young when I told her that.
Mm.
Now, I I lived with that. I went through university, came out, got married. When I got married, because in our day, you don't normally see the bride until you get, after the wedding and they come and pick you up in the evening or whatever. When we now started living together, first time I just came out of the bathroom and I was standing in front of the mirror and I was looking at my face and I'm saying, why do I look so much like her? That is my mom. Why do I look so much like her? I really don't want to look like her because I don't want to be like her.
Right.
In the process, my husband just came in and saw the scars on my back and he said, what is all this? What is all this? Where did you get all this from? I just broke down and he said, we were ready to get ready to go to church. That day we didn't go to church because we had to tell pastor that we won't be able to come in. But
Right.
he got me to, I couldn't tell him everything. I was literally still sobbing and crying all those years. And, I'm talking from age 4, but now I'm 25 and I'm now having to, say it all out. So he was very compassionate. He said, you know what? Just write it down. He said it just felt that I needed to just write it. As you're writing it, it will help. I couldn't write anything. I wrote half a paragraph, but I couldn't write anything because my hand was literally shaking each time I wanted to write. And he didn't really know what to do. And because he joined me in the United Kingdom, he came from abroad.
Mm-hmm.
So in church they were talking about forgiveness, and I'd never thought of forgiving my parents ever because I felt that they were the ones that did something to me, even though I'd served in the church. But I never felt forgiveness will not come to that point of my life. I didn't think about it. And so I had to come to that point. The pastor just said, well, there's someone, you need to forgive. Was it my husband that offended me? I said, no, my husband hasn't done anything. So my
Right.
husband, so my husband said, maybe it's my mom and my dad. And so they said I had to forgive. And I couldn't at that point. I cried and wept. But when I got home, I had to spend time praying and, the Lord laid in my heart to forgive and helped me to forgive. It was
Good.
when I forgave them, I wrote the book within a month. I was able to write everything. I mean, it's in more detail in the book. I'm just trying to make it short because of time. And so, unfortunately, so I wrote all of it down. And so there was a case that came up, Victoria Columbia case, which came up around 2008, of
Mm-hmm.
somebody who had been abused. She came over to the UK to stay with her aunt, and she died. She was basically killed, abused and killed.
Mm.
So I'm hearing this just at this point in time, not even knowing. I'm still beginning to learn what abuse is
Right.
because I hadn't really understood it. I hadn't been for any training to know what abuse was. And so when I heard that, I said, that's not right. This is what I went through in the 60s. Why is it still going on now?
Mm-hmm.
And that was how I started to write. And so in the process, I gave my siblings a copy of the books. It
Good.
was called at that time, What a Life is what I called the book, What a Life. Because indeed, what a life it was. I mean, anything I did, I will get beaten for it. I
Mm-hmm.
will be And so when I passed it out, my brother, who's the only boy in the family, said, he's going to report me. He's going to take me to court that I'm lying. Why should I be putting so much pressure on my parents? And I'm saying, he didn't actually come to me directly. He came through my immediate junior sister. And she told me, I said, tell him if he wants to go to court, he should go. Because what I'm saying is true. As at that time, I had been going into schools, I've been talking to them about ACEs, I've been raising the awareness, using my injuries and myself as a case study to help them to understand the impact and also for them to see that there are students in the school, which there were, who were going through some things but refused to talk. They will talk, but then when you have now, they've made a disclosure, you've told the parent or invited the parent, and now you're sending them back to that bad place, they're not going to say anything. And then I had to explain why. So that was a learning for them. So
Mm-hmm.
this is what I was doing in schools. I was invited to the House of Parliament to give a talk. I was speaking to the health, the nurses, the doctors, just to raise that awareness at that time. And so
Using yourself as a case study.
yes, yes. Because I have all the injuries and I have the emotional, I have the psychological, I have the manipulation, I have all of that. And so I was just using that just to empower them to and understand. Unfortunately, my brother then went to another level. He went to on the internet that I was living a fantasy, and he wrote all kinds of things, and he said, I'm your brother, and I will, he's going to expose the truth. And I was wondering, I guess my mother put him up to it. Of course, I don't know, but I mean, they're very close.
Hmm.
And so I had to go and find out what can I do here. And because I'd been to so many schools, they had known me in the area. And I was wondering, if I don't do something, they're going to feel it's true, especially because he said he's my brother and he's even put his name there. So I sought legal advice. They said, you know what, I need to, they'll help me to stop him getting an injunction, but I need to get a police reference. That was a problem because all this time I had not said anything to anybody. The only person that knew about the abuse was myself and my husband, and maybe my children. My children, they were younger then because they helped me to type up
Right.
my script. So it was hard. I prayed about it, and I said, okay, you know what? Is it just to get a police reference and that's it, and they'll get my brother to stop? I forgot all about my safeguarding rules and procedures. And so I was so excited that, at least I'll get this reference so that at least they can stop, because I'd been invited to a school to talk to the children and the teachers.
Hmm.
So he then, when I called the police, they said, well, they'll come to the house, or do I want to come? I said, come to the house. I've got my book. I've got the things print off from the internet, and I've got all the injuries to show for it. I didn't realize that I was actually making a disclosure indirectly, even though as a professional, I should have known that. So here they came to the house and they said, oh, well, they were shocked because the injuries on my head, like I wear a wig right now because I have 8 injuries on my head. Like I was saying, some of the things that happened. And
Right.
I then had to go, they said, well, you know what, I've made a disclosure, so this is going to be investigated as a historic case of abuse. They then put some police on the case, and I had to be interviewed. They then took me to, I had to then have a forensic examination. So they did a body map. That was terrible. It was painful because all the injuries of years ago, all the pain just came back in one go.
Yep.
It was then I found out that the head injury where I was hit with the mop stick is just 2 millimeters from my brain. So it was just God that saved me for such a time as this, I believe. And so they invited my parents and said, you know what, if you accept that, if you agree that you did all these things, they're not going to do anything because it's 50 years ago, you're elderly now. My parents denied. They actually denied that they did not do any of those things. They showed them the pictures, they denied it. And they told them if they deny it, they're going to do a full investigation and the Crown prosecution will take them to court. And that's what happened, unfortunately. 3 years investigation. My parents were both convicted. I had to go to court. I was the victim. I had to go to court, and they tore me to bits. The CPS lawyer said, I said to him, I said, do you think I should take off my wig at any point in time? Because that's the only place where I can show that there are some injuries. I can't show my legs because I'm wearing, oh, no, 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 I don't want you to, your dignity is very important. And I just felt, okay. Now, here I was in court.
Mm.
My father got a lawyer. My mother got a lawyer. My dad got a lawyer. So I'm confronted with 2 lawyers who were telling me that I was telling lies.
Mm.
When when the UK changed their currency to the decimal, as I called it, because that was what it was in 71, my mother used cable wire to beat me on my legs because I couldn't count properly. Because the lawyer said, so where are the injuries? What did you do? You're lying. How can you be telling lies on your parents, elderly parents like this? What man that? So I said, you know what? What story do you want to hear? Is it in this house or this house? So when I then said, this is what happened, the judge said, that was 1971. How old were you then? And that makes you 7 years old. And he said, 7 years old? And that decimal thing was so hard for everybody. How much more is 7-year-old? So that went in my favor. Then the next one was, he asked another question. Well, you don't have any injuries. We know that you're a very good, you're a professional. You can do this. And I'm just saying, I said, put up my hand. I said, Judge, I said, can I take off my wig? Because obviously they didn't know I was even wearing a wig.
Right.
So I took off the wig, and I just broke down at that point. I just started, why can't she just tell the truth? Now the judge had seen it because he's way up. He saw the injuries. He said I should show the jury. And I think because of the outburst and I was crying and sobbing, the case, they had to adjourn it for a few minutes, for I think about an hour. But anyway, the summary of it was that both my parents were convicted. My mother had to go to prison.
Mm.
My dad was given a suspended sentence because he kicked me at the back of my head. I was 7 when he
Mm.
kicked me into the back of my head because there's a kind of punishment where they will say stoop down. I don't know whether you've heard about when they ask you to sit down. So you're more or less going on, you're using one leg to balance, you're using one leg high up, and then you're using one finger to balance on the floor. It's on
Mm.
the internet that if people want to check that out.
Mm-hmm.
And all what I did was that the neighbors downstairs said, come and stay with us. Because normally when I come back from school, I'm sitting on the staircase waiting for them.
Right.
And I think the people downstairs had told my parents that, what you're doing with your little girl is not good. How can you be leaving her alone? Because there are other flats in the house. And so my parents said I mustn't go downstairs anymore. Now, they saw me again sitting on the stairs and they said, oh, come in. I said, my parents said I mustn't come. Oh, no, come in. We'll talk with them. Now, this was what happened as a result. I got I was asked to stoop down. In the process, my father said, why did you go downstairs? I told you not to go. And he just kicked me to the back of my head. Now, I didn't know much better. I was just told to, blood started pouring. I was asked to go, I was a bad child. So I went to bed that night and I woke up crying. I didn't realize there was blood all over my pillow. And they started talking in the language because I didn't understand the native language because basically I didn't know the language at the time.
Right.
So they then had to call the ambulance. And when the ambulance was coming, my father said, make sure you tell them you fell down the stairs. And I'm afraid because everything and so, do you remember what I said you should tell? Make sure you tell them you fell down the stairs. I was okay. Um, Meanwhile, remember, my head is bleeding. The back of my head is bleeding. Make sure you tell them you fell down the stairs. So anyway, they take the ambulance, get to the hospital, and the doctor's asking me, what happened? I fell
Mm.
down the stairs. And what did you fall on? I couldn't answer that question because really, I didn't know that was going to be a follow-on. So I didn't answer. So I had to have ice. I had to have the x-ray done. So I had to be put on ice because I think that there was swelling and pressure. Now I was bandaged up, obviously led to go home. But all these kind of things, all this abuse, I never could tell anyone because I
Mm.
also thought it was my next door neighbor going through. Now
Right.
going now from 2008, when 2019 after the court case, I just felt, you know what, I've got to tell people about this
Mm-hmm.
because many people don't know what abuse is. I didn't know, which is sad. And so telling people what abuse was, going to schools, talking to the safeguarding teachers, talking to hospital staff, letting them know that, this is what one needs to look at. And children need to be looked after at a very early age because if I know what I knew now when I was younger, some of the things I'm having to suffer that I'm, trying to recover from mentally, I was diagnosed with complex PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm happy that I'm in recovery. And it's a day-to-day journey because one has to keep on going and just trusting God for that healing. But at the same time, we also need to be aware that the physical health impact as well. Because for me, yes, I'm a health professional. That's why I try to make sure I have that knowledge. But for those that don't, things like, diabetes, yes, obesity. And I was very big at that point in time because of the sadness and everything else. I was at 24, but I managed to come back down to a size 16, 18 because I committed myself that, I must see my children grow up.
Mm.
And so that was what kept me going. But talking to people, raising the awareness. recently, I mean, over the last few months, I've been in and out of hospital. Why? Because one of the things I didn't mention that my mom did was to kick me in my stomach. I didn't realize, and maybe I lied again, I can't remember. I remember the things, but I don't remember what I did.
Right.
And so having a what we call a sliding hernia that can just go in and slide out, there's no cure for it than to be on medication. And I'm saying, God, and these are some of the things that can bring back the triggers that, she did this, she did that. But in all, I am grateful that I believe God brought me forward, helped me to be here for such a time as this, to be able to raise that awareness and to
Right.
help people to know that, if you are suffering from this, you need to get help and you need to get that early intervention because you don't want it to go into adulthood and you're then beginning to suffer and you're at that bus stop and you're not able to move on.
Hmm.
That's,
And you are a cycle breaker.
yes.
You live to tell the story
Yeah.
against your parents,
Mhm.
your family.
Yeah.
You had a community, it sounds like, that supported you, though.
Pardon?
You had a community, like you had the people that, like how you said you didn't have a memory that was saying, don't forget, you fell
Yeah.
down the stairs, or don't forget, you had these things. These people are the ones that actually supported you and believed you.
Yes.
I tell
Right.
people sometimes I call them, instead of family, I call them relatives because they are a part of your community to support you. I have
Yeah.
tons of relatives because I too have family members that don't want to honor the things that have happened. So I totally understand. So congratulations to you for being a warrior for change and sharing your story after all of those years, because the fact that they were convicted is a wonderful thing. I hate that you had to be your own case study, but look at you. You know what I mean? Like you talk about ACEs education. So what was it? Was it the ACEs education that made you want to step up? What was it that made you want to advocate for yourself and go and talk into the schools and go and have that conversation so others can be aware?
Firstly, for myself, I needed to be when I was aware, when I became aware of ACEs and the impact, because I saw when I was going through training, I knew the impact on myself, and I felt okay, now it makes sense to me, and now I have something that I can actually use in schools. So it's not just talking about abuse now; it's talking about the impact on the child as a young person, because I didn't realize when I was growing up my mother would try and teach me some mathematics whereby you're doing the takeaway. So you're doing like 20 takeaway 12 and you have to carry over. I
Mm,
couldn't get it. And I'll be beaten and beaten and beaten and beaten. Now having my own kids and I felt so sorry because if I knew what I knew then and I had the help then, maybe they wouldn't be suffering from dyslexia today, or
mm,
maybe they would be suffering from ADHD today. Not on the higher level of the spectrum, but there are traces of that. And I'm happy that we were able to do those assessments for them so that they could get the help and support they need to get through school. I
right.
didn't have I've had to have coping mechanisms. I can't memorize. And I didn't realize it was tailored towards the brain development at some point in my life. But I couldn't, even when I went through university, I had to sit down and read my notes every single day. So if I
Mhm.
had a lecture today, I'm reading it for the next 1 week till we have the lecture to make sure that I don't forget it. That was how I was able to study. And there are children like that today who are going through anxiety, can't talk, can't say what's going on at home.
Mhm. Mhm.
Unfortunately, we have parents who are so, the whole world will love them, but they have no idea what the child is facing behind those doors. Those were the kind of parents I had. And so there are so many other children that their parents will come and be so nice to everybody in school, but in the house, they're like, tigers or bears, and the child is so afraid and they can't concentrate. And that's the reason why I go into schools to raise that awareness so that the teachers who are closest to the children will be able to understand what those children are going through so that they will not be deprived or put at a disadvantage, but they will be able to go through school with that support.
And you are doing it. You are doing it. You have every book that you can think of. I know y'all know me. I am a researcher. And so the guests that we have and what I love about the guests, especially in the Cycle Breaker series, are they are you. They are the cycle breakers. They are the ones that are on that journey to not just helping themselves, but help others heal. And I commend you again for going into the schools to do this because you have tons of books. And I can see for me, my emphasis has always been ACEs education, but the emphasis of extracurricular activity and that creative writing, I see it. I see it because you are a writer. I just loved everything you have. Basically, courses and workshops cater to everyone from elementary school all the way to adulthood. And when I tell you guys she's on Amazon, she's on Amazon. Everything checked. Not to say it like that, but we have a lot of us that have been in the front lines for years. We weren't social media. We didn't have time. We didn't have that opportunity because we were sitting in classrooms. Just to give you some background on me, I actually was a special education and still am a special education representative and administrator for schools. So the IEPs, the 504, special education, everything from gifted and talented all the way to severe profound. Those acronyms is how I became interested in ACEs because those acronyms, the emotionally disturbed, the behavior, all of that, ADHD, PTSD, all of that, I believe has something to do with ACEs. And so me having this podcast is my way of showing how autoimmune, the nervous system, ADHD, PTSD. All of these things are related to the abuse, the neglect, the household dysfunction, and the other adversities that go under the ACEs umbrella. So, again, the work that you are doing is great. You are a therapist, a psychotherapist. So, tell us more about that.
Okay, so 2005 or six, I decided that yes, I'm actually a health professional clinical scientist. So normally all the blood tests that I've done when people are looking for cases, if there's leukemia or something, we're the ones that diagnose that and see the patients. But I wanted to move into something that I could also use to help people directly on the front line. So I decided to study. I did my course in counseling. And then I went on to doing psychotherapy and then homing in on things like mother wound
Mm,
therapy, father wound therapy, inner child therapy, and also working around knowing that the roots and the basis of all of those is ACEs. And so I then started to include, when I then joined, we had the meeting and we heard about Dr. Nadine, who was talking about, I think, a TEDx talk. And so there was another program going on in UK at the time. So they were doing ACs for young people, ACs for adult domestic violence. And I just thought, you know what, we need to go for this. So my husband and I signed up for the courses. We did all of them.
mhm,
And so from then onwards, we started to build on that because there was, as at that time, I hadn't really registered as a psychotherapist. But then I decided that, you know what, I'm not just going to do the education, I'm also going to help people and have that opportunity. And I've over the years I've been seeing and noticing that it is abuse and everything else that is the roots of ACs. You can't talk about ACs without looking at all these other areas. And what people are really going through is ACs. If
mhm.
the ACs are sorted out, including bereavement and grief, if all those are sorted out, there won't be need for all these other things in the world today. And so working with people and trying to empower them, that was one of the reasons why I decided to go on this journey. And I'm developing the more. Recently, I think it was last year actually, and early this year, I did some courses with ACs Aware. I did a few of their courses. And so I felt, oh, well, this is fantastic. I did the one about nature therapy and also early intervention and screening, and which I then delivered training to an NGO here in the UK last summer on screening within the group. So this was a youth group. So I said, you know what, now that you can raise up the older ones can be the champions. So they will do the screening because, the peer to peer. They can do the screenings and then they can then report back to the head of the youth club. And so that was how I started that. And I thought, now because I'm a therapist, I can have my own clinic, which is great because all I need to do now is to work with schools and actually get those referrals, work with colleges, get those referrals, and do the therapy with a whole lot of other therapists as well. So it's now building on that. And because from I've been writing courses for years and getting them validated by awarding bodies. So I've just compiled 6 courses that I want to do, one for therapists so that they can actually add AC screening and intervention to their practice, but then also for schools and multi-agencies to be able to understand and know how to help the children. Because toxic stress for me is, I know what that is very significant. And people tend to not understand what toxic stress is. So to have that competence and understanding will save a whole lot of issues that actually happen. So that's the reason why I'm doing the work I'm doing, is to help other people.
And that's the reason why we need you. See, I'm an educator. I want to stick with the educational part. As you see, I can break it down to where people can understand it and break it down into trainings, workshops, sessions, cohorts, classes, workshops, trainings, whatever they are looking for. I can do that. You're doing that from a therapist perspective. Now, I will share with you, I'm doing it with, I'm doing trainings with therapists as well. So I'm working with counselors, I'm working with social workers, therapists, educators, business, barbershops, police trainings, wherever, because I think this is something that needs to be discussed, period. I'm listening to people as they talk and they share their stories, and they're like, yeah, because of my childhood trauma, or oh, yes, this is so toxic, or because of my past experiences. Past experiences, ACEs, childhood trauma, ACEs. You know what I mean? It's like, what is it? Why do you think people don't want to say the acronym? Or what do you wish people understood more about it that isn't talked about enough?
One thing I'm going to say this, but in the Black community,
Hmm.
it's a silence culture. You don't talk about it. If you talk about it, it's a taboo. If you talk about it, you're not one of us now. You're one of them. And so, yeah, I got a backlash from after the court case. I got a real backlash from the community because how could what is discipline? It says spoil the roads, spare the road, spoil the child, and all of that. And so I then had to say, okay, fine, I understand discipline, but look at my head, look at the injuries. When I show them the injuries, then they keep quiet. I said, so what do you call that then? You know, and so it's it's a very important issue. It's a very important issue.
But look at us. You felt like you were doing this on your own. I did too. And now here we are together. And we're saying the same thing. We're in two different countries. We are in two different continents. And we are saying the same thing, you guys. ACEs really doesn't have a color at all. It just depends on what community you are in. And in
Yeah.
our community, we normalize these things. I honestly cannot believe that your parents went as far as they did to manipulate and gaslight your family. It's very hard to hear, but when I tell you I've experienced it, I know people that have. There are people on my podcast that have shared. When I go into different speaking engagements, when I go into different conferences, trainings, you would be surprised.
Mm.
But that's why we're here. That's the reason why we have to continue to do this work because, well, you said something about that generational trauma. And I will share with you in my book, I don't cut to chapter 7 or 9 to talk about generational trauma. I talk about it in chapter 2 because I think that's what helped me understand ACEs a lot. I had questions and my parents just wouldn't answer. They wouldn't
Mm.
answer. And so to this day, love them. That's their story to share. But it helped me understand why. Because again, there was another generation before them. I will say I learned doing a circle. We had about 4 or 5 generations that were in one of the community circles that we were having. And one of the women was married and currently married for 65 years. But she put an emphasis on that. And she said, listen, you guys, while we're clapping and saying this is a wonderful thing, 65 years ago, women didn't have jobs. Women had to stay home, cook, do these things. And how our tradition and our transition has changed over the years, that's another reason why there's so many household dysfunctions that are happening. So I will say this, we have a lot of work to do because I'm telling you, the awareness is what is going to help others. I hate that you had to be a case study, but I am going to say I'm grateful for you because there's another person out there willing to share her story. There's another person that is out there advocating for ACEs. So I will ask you a few more questions because you've been on this healing journey for a very, very, very long time. Shout out to your husband who believes you and supports you to this day. But if you could say one thing to someone just beginning their healing journey, what would it be?
Well, it's not going to be easy,
Mhm.
but but it's not impossible. It is possible to heal, and it's to get the right therapy for you. Um, I I think mine was faith based all along. I mean, the church didn't know because there wasn't. I mean, when it comes to mental health in the church, nobody wants to know that. Nobody wants to deal with it. But and so I didn't really tell the church. And being in the leadership, I mean, that would it would not be okay. But it was my faith. One thing that I would say my parents did for me was that they said I had to go to church every Sunday on my own. So I'll walk up the hill to St. Stephen's Church, up the hill, and I'll go for Sunday school. And then I'll come back home. My parents at home, they didn't go to church. But that is what kept me, my faith. And that is what has kept me to this day. So I believe that the healing that I'm going through, yes, I can do all the therapy, I can do all the other bits, but I believe my faith in God, the fact that I was able to forgive, which is very important before you even start going on any journey, because if you can't forgive, then you can't really move forward. And after forgiving, just holding on to the Lord and then I went for therapy. And I think that's why I'm in a better place today.
It is. And I'm going to tell you, our community is going to love you. I said I would love for you to meet Mick, but I definitely would love for you to meet Sheree. I would love for you to meet Elisa. These are people that definitely understand ACEs. They're authors as well, and they share their story, but they share their story and say that if it wasn't having or being introduced to the faith-based part of ACEs, that's what helped them heal. And so I agree with you 100%. This is what I've been doing for the past 3 years, and it works for me. And so to hear you say that, that's a wonderful thing. Not to knock anybody that is not, but people have to find their best way for self-care because that's what it is for me. It's the awareness and the fact that you're willing to take care of yourself. So somebody that is dealing with drug abuse knows you can't continue to do the drugs if you're trying to heal. Someone with alcohol abuse knows, well, you really can't do that. Sexual abuse, financial abuse, neglect. You have to start taking care of yourself. So I think that's why I'm so into the awareness, the communication, the community, and the empowerment because I've watched it. I've watched it heal people. I've watched it help, or not heal people, but help them on their healing journey. Because again, understanding ACEs, and I always tell people, understanding ACEs that study and just taking that quiz is just like the identifier. It's the introduction. It is this is really real. Oh my God, what's our next steps? And then we have the options of different types of therapies, psychotherapists, EMDR. You have breathing techniques. You have all of these wonderful things out there. But again, our community doesn't know those things at all because we normalize those things. So while I hate that these things happen to you, I'm grateful to have you here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
No, I thank you so much. Let people know how they can find you because I am going to definitely introduce you to our community. From here, we'll exchange, do emails. Join us always on Thursdays. But again, there are other people. Like I said, you would be great with Jorge. He has broken down the ACEs quiz through a training and he breaks it down. I think a lot of people get confused once they take the quiz. It's like, okay, well, let's break it down. Let's show you why this works and why it doesn't work, or let's continue to do this so I can educate you on that. And he has done a phenomenal job. So the people that we have in the community, they were a lot of people did travel for the International Awareness Conference, but this community built, we connected, we support each other, and we are on a heavy and fast movement. So join us because I'm telling you, your value is going to be so needed, especially with all the powerful resources that you have. People will definitely grab them because they know your experiences not only speak for themselves, but you're a cycle breaker. How can people find you?
Well, I think Instagram at the moment, so it's Dr. Lydia underscore psychotherapist. Um, you can message me there, DM me there, connect with me, follow me, and that would be much appreciated.
Let me tell you guys, she's all on Amazon. She's being real quiet. She's being real humble. And I love that about you, Dr. Lydia. But all of her books, all of her resources, everything is out there visible. You guys, a lot of her, if you look on her website, if you go on her website, she has a lot of freebies to start you guys with. This is how passionate she is about educating others. So I thank you. I really do. And of course, this will not be the last of us. You caught me in a transition of being a mom and starting school again, but I'm glad you stuck in there with me because I'm gonna tell you guys now, she was persistent and she got Dr. Torie, and that's the type of people I want to work with. We're all experiencing life and we're all doing things. But your level and your commitment to this, I am definitely interested in working with you and help build that bridge so we can continue to impact others. So I thank you again for being here. And you guys, I know you guys are going to love this episode because it has just impacted me so more to continue to do what I am doing, to find value and add value to our podcast by having you as a guest, Dr. Lydia. Thank you so much. You
Thank you
guys,
very much.
another episode of Be Victorious. You all seen it. You can see me and find me everywhere. We are expanding, you guys. It's Be Victorious Educational Services. This is our Be Victorious podcast. My name is Dr. Torie, who creates victory in others by creating victory through education. Another episode of Be Victorious podcast. Have a great day. Bye, you guys.